Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to another Lack of Focus Game of Thrones edition. I am your host, Ed Horn, and alongside me tonight, our producer extraordinaire, one Mr. Kris Sheriff. Kris, how's it going?
Good, thanks, Ed.
And our good friend, Mr. Sean Dorsey. Sean, how's it going?
Very well. How you doing?
Excellent. So this is the Game of Thrones edition. So we're recording this quite literally the night after the finale of Game of Thrones. So I do want to spoiler alert on all of this. We intend to spoil the entire show, the entirety of the 8 seasons. So if you have not had the opportunity to watch the show, turn back now. There be dragons here.
Oh shit!
I also
I gotta go then.
It's already spoilers, man. Telling people there's dragons. Oh.
I also want to caveat this with one other thing. Normally, I am pretty laid back and a little light on the bombs that I drop on my profanity levels on the on any show that we do. That's not going to happen tonight because I usually get very animated when I talk about stuff that I love. So if offensive language offends you and you don't want to get spoiled, turn back now. There be dragons here.
If offensive language offends you, just fuck off now.
All right, now we've got it out of the way. All right, so you've been spoiled. You've spoiler warned. If you continue on, it's your own fault from here. Okay.
So Sean wanted to start off with just a thumbs up, thumbs down. Did you mean for this episode, Sean, or for the whole thing?
I'm thinking for the whole thing.
For the whole thing? Okay, that's an easy thumbs up.
Okay.
I got my honorary Starbucks cup for.
That's good. If I can, I'm more than happy to answer first. I think overall the show is really, really good for a ton of reasons. Bringing fantasy into the mainstream, which has been really difficult to do. Sure, you had Lord of the Rings, about a decade and a half ago, whenever those came out. But to have as many people non-nerdy talking about fantasy, talking about dragons, talking about magic in the workplace was really cool for me. It just, galvanized the fact that when I was a nerd in the 80s and 90s playing Dungeons and Dragons that I was right and you were wrong. So I don't care what you say. Fantasy is a cool genre. So overall, I would have to give it a huge thumbs up. Visually, it was beautiful. The characters were well done. I do honestly feel that it tapered off whenever the developers moved away from written material and working off of outlines, but we'll kind of get into that. So if it's an overall show, thumbs up.
Yeah, thumbs up for the entirety of the show. Got its strong points and its weak points, but overall, I think it's definitely worth watching. I stopped buying the series because I knew that when they eventually brought out the full box set, I'd end up just buying that anyway. So it's something I'll buy to stick on the shelf. Whether I read the books more than I watch the series is a different matter, but it's probably going to be up there with like Band of Brothers for one of those painting things. You stick a show on just to have on in the background while you're painting. So it'll live on in infamy.
I have that same feeling about Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yeah.
Like if I want something to play in the background that I don't have to pay attention to, Next Generation. But that's neither here nor there.
Apart from
Sean?
DS9, but...
Oh yeah, of course.
So out of all of this, I have the weird experience compared to you guys because I saw the whole first season, not because I wanted to, but because I was almost forced to by a friend of mine. So this is the first live episode of when it was on that I actually watched of Game of Thrones. I've actually only seen the first season, but I watched all of Ozyman Review's summaries because I'm a person, I don't care about spoilers, so but my goal was to wait until the last episode to watch my first episode and then go back and watch the whole thing. Because one thing it kills me is when series take this long to be made and I get bored with it and then I just decide never to watch it again because I'm waiting too long.
Yeah, like there's a year and a half in between seasons.
Right.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous in my opinion. Especially, when there's all the money in the world that they can throw at this thing anymore. They could have done it, and there's a lot of series like this where they shoot multiple seasons at a time, where they crush it together. And this one was excessive, in my opinion. When it came to really and truthfully, you had 7 seasons, not 8. If you put 7 and 8 together as one, they just stretched it as long as they could. But
I don't know that I agree with that one, but I'll let you. I'll let it fly
Well,
for a little bit.
yeah, but at the end of the day, yeah, seven's different than eight. I get that, but the one thing that's interesting to me is it took them over 10 years to make this. What was it, 11 years, I think? It took them to make.
So the first season premiered in 2008, I want to say, which was the same year that Dance of Dragons, the last book, came out.
Right.
I was just posted to Lossy when the show started up. So, yeah.
You're looking at 11 plus years to make the equivalency of 7 seasons worth of episodes. And these aren't the 24, episodic seasons. These are, what were they, 10 or 12 a season?
Yeah, so each season was 10 episodes long until season 6. Season 7 was 7 episodes, and then season 8 was 6.
Yeah, so if you
Now, granted, for the season 8, the episodes ran long, most of them, where they were over an hour long, in some cases almost 2. So you got like a full 10 hours worth of a full season. Like each episode was 1 hour long per season. So you almost got a full season out of season 8 just in 7 episodes.
Right. And I get that. I'm talking episodic, not time.
Right. No, I understand.
That's where I say 7 and 8 could have been crushed together basically and made into one season if you look at a lot of series. But I'm going to say this: it's the best Lord of the Rings ending since Lord of the Rings.
Okay, so the one thing I do wanted to go through around the robin real quick. The season finale in a word. Kris, I'll start with you.
Meh.
Meh.
It was what I expected it to be.
Okay. Sean?
Enjoyable because I didn't go in with high expectations.
And I'm going to be the opposite end of that one. I'm going to say disappointing because I did go in with high expectations.
So
we're a good dichotomy.
Well, before you got on, I told Kris. What did I tell you, Kris?
Yeah,
this is The Last Jedi all over again.
Yeah, I said Ed was going to be an angry old man.
Yeah.
I don't know that all right. So I don't know that I necessarily would equate this to the same disappointment level that I had with The Last Jedi as with this one. I'm disappointed for different reasons, I think. So if we want to kind of start getting into some of it, you had made a statement before that, you felt like they had kind of like stretched out the last season to go over 7 and 8. I feel like they condensed 4 seasons worth of material into a season and a half. And I think that's probably one of the biggest problems that I had with the last season specifically, but ever since probably about midway through season 6, where it was clear that developers moved off of printed material because they were out of it, and were going off of the outlines that Martin provided to HBO. So they had an idea, a solid idea of where it was going, but they didn't have the details in between, which is what the books had provided, which is why seasons 1 through 4 were so good. Season 5, for the most part, was so good. And then 6 and 7 and obviously 8 really kind of just went like at light speed to the finish line because I don't feel that they had enough material to build that off of and didn't... I don't want to say that they didn't have the creative aptitude to kind of fill in the blanks, but it really feels that way. Like they just like, okay, here's the end. What's the fastest route we can to get there? And then just got there. I think if they had, let's take Daenerys' turn towards madness, for an example. A lot of the fans complained about the fact that she had gone nuts and it seemed like turned on a dime. Like where you have scenes in Marine in seasons 5 and 6 where she's horrified by the fact that her dragon was out and had gone out and killed a child. And then to the point where she locked up her dragon. She didn't want to see that ever happen again, to turning on a dime and barbecuing a whole city. How did that
also crucified a lot of people?
She did. And okay, so that is a very
I'm not on
challenge.
board with crucifixion being, a nice way to deal with your enemies.
I completely understand, and it's interesting that the character John actually kind of makes the point to the audience. It's almost like there were certain scenes where they were specifically talking to the audience. When she was crucifying the masters or the noblemen in Marine, Nobody cared because they were bad people.
Yeah.
Whenever she killed all the Dothraki hordes, they were going to do worse to her. Nobody cared. When she barbecued a woman while she was stepping onto a pyre, nobody cared because these were bad people. But all of a sudden, she makes a turn and then she's murdering innocent civilians, and people are like, "Oh, I didn't see that coming." So, I mean, it is a fair argument, but I would have much rather seen that twist to madness a little bit drawn out. There's a lot of things I wish I'd have seen a little bit drawn out, but like it genuinely felt from an audience's perspective that she was a good guy, she's a good guy, she's a good guy, and then you get to the last two episodes and she's a bad guy. Like, so how did that happen?
I heard an interesting theory, and it's just one that I've heard offhand, is that they had these actors tied up so long that they wanted to get the hell away from it, some of these, Daenerys or what's her name?
Emilia Clarke.
She was 22 when she started, 21 when she started.
Yes, she was young when she started.
Yeah, so when you tie actors up this long in these types of epic tales, I think at the end of the day, when you do this 11 years ago, you don't think about 11 years down the road. You're thinking back then, oh my God, we got this great story, these great characters, but you tied these people up so long. And
the show's called A Game of Thrones, which is a single book. So it could have finished after series 1 and be a self-contained story.
That's a true statement.
The counterpoint to that, though, is one of the most difficult things as an actor to find is steady work, which is why you had all those actors that were in the MCU for 12 years or 13 years that they ran for some of that.
I would argue that the millions and millions of dollars outweighed the steady work,
and it is a fair point.
They can go and deliver milk, be a milkman, get paid a couple of $1,000 a year, but I'm pretty sure the millions upon millions kind of counterbalances the fact that you have to stay in shape for this long. And I'm not belittling the commitment to a role, but that's why they are rewarded the way they are.
HBO had given the developers unlimited time and unlimited budget to finish it in whatever time frame they wanted. I agree that is probably the end reason why they tried to button it up in 8 seasons as opposed to drawing it out to say 10. So that's probably the reasons behind it. But what it did is it forced a scenario where there's a ton of disappointments in the series overall. Yeah. And I think that's probably the big part that drives that's the biggest part for me.
Let me ask you this, Ed. When you talk about disappointment, you had gold, you had cinema gold, or you had theatrical gold for 4 seasons, right?
Correct.
One of the things that it's happened with Star Wars, it's happened with all these other epic, long drawn out things, The Hobbit, even Lord of the Rings, where you have these gigantic IPs, is that it gets harder and harder and harder to continue to top to meet the expectations of the fans, and then to top the gold that you had the season before, And when you get into season 5, that's where it started to the needle started to move, and you hit 6, 7, and 8, and it just kept going down further and further. And whether you look at, I watch a lot of people, on Facebook, on the internet bitching about this, but I think this is a hard property without the source material, without the guy writing it, to be able to, if this was done 10 years from now when the last 2 books are out, I think it's easier to do then than it is now, because you ran out of source material, and now you're trying to create new stories, like you said, off of the treatments, that are being put out for the book. It gets more difficult, unless, Martin was actually either writing these episodes or in the writing room when they were writing these episodes. But once again, I think that time, this fell into that world of time, started to catch up to them. Whether the actor, the main actors were making like $500,000 an episode last season.
Yeah, at that last season, yeah.
That's $3 million, and like 350 in season 7. When you look at the big picture, I just think they ran out of time. They ran out of George R.R. Martin didn't come through with a book in that time. And you think about it, there needed to be a book to create more source material. Didn't happen. And then you don't have the finale's made up. The finale is based upon a thought rather than on a material that's already out there. And it's hard. It's hard.
I have a theory on that one too. But
Well,
so I feel like I need to define my disappointments maybe
Yeah.
and like the things that I'm disappointed in to kind of get to the point that I'm trying to drive. So my levels of disappointments come from the things that were built up over the seasons that literally just got dropped off and meant nothing. And I've got 5 examples of things that I know that the fans are like, well, what happened to this? And what about that? The first, of course, is the whole Azor Ahai story arc. The concept that somebody was, the prince that was promised that was going to defeat the Night King, and you had this whole thing built up with the Red Priests of lore, and you had the Red Woman who believed that it was originally Stannis, and then it was Jon, and then it's Arya,
or it was Bran,
or it was Bran, one or the other. But like neither one of those, like they built so much into that, and it just kind of like dropped off the face of the earth. And no mention of it in any way, shape, or form. Like I genuinely expected it. So let's take 2 characters that we know that were brought back by the Red God. Okay, Beric and Darien for starters. So I can accept from a storytelling point of view if the original story arc is that Arya is going to be the one to kill the Night King. Why the Red God is bringing him back? Because he's going to pull the old hold the door to keep her alive long enough to be able to complete her missions. I can accept that. I'm okay with that. If that's where the story arc was supposed to go, that makes sense to me. Then why the fuck did he bring Jon back? What's Jon doing there? And then that gets into my second story arc that really kind of dropped off the face of earth. You had fans rabid for years trying to figure out who Jon's parents were. Oh, is he a secret Targaryen? I think he is. And then, of course, it all gets revealed, and then it meant nothing.
Oh, that's right.
Ultimately, what was the payoff for that story? What was the reasoning for hiding clues throughout 5 books and not paying that off any way, shape, or form?
If Jon isn't Daenerys' nephew, she doesn't go insane. Because they get married and live happily ever after.
There's Easter eggs throughout the entire story on who his parents could be, just as a turning point for her to go nuts.
No,
I think so.
So you have to remember that at that point when the show starts. So one premise I want to get away from is episode 1 of season 1. Things start deviating from the book. So you have to throw out the books as, the overriding story arc, because it's its own thing.
True, but it was very close. You have to admit, season was very close.
But it's like you start off with one little vibration, and then it gets worse and worse and worse, and then the wings fall off and your plane crashes. That's how divergent theory and fucking hell, how like chaos theory and all of that works. You have one little change which monumentally affects something else, and it all deviates. So, like 10 minutes in to episode 1, you can be like, yeah, this is pretty close to a book. And there are points where it's lifted, but
they condense characters or they condense story arcs into and I get that for brevity. I get that.
But the show is its own thing, so I won't. How to phrase it? So, like, you have all of the stuff about Jon is taken from the book. Correct. All of those hints, and they have to put it in there because it's a massive part of the book. But ultimately, what you then do with it is the payoff of Jon sitting on the Iron Throne and being a fair and just ruler. Is that actually the payoff you want? Or is that a hollow victory that is just fan service?
I think
is Jon's self-sacrifice and act and what actually happened, is that not more to character? That he completely sacrifices his life, livelihood, his chance at happiness to do what was right.
To guard what though? So the ultimate
the realms of men.
Wait, So the ultimate goal for him was to participate in the battle that defeated the Night King, participate but not really be horrified and end up killing Daenerys at the end, to then go to the Night's Watch. What's the goal of the Night's Watch again? They're protecting the realm of men. From what? Well, the White Walkers and the Night King. Oh wait, he's dead, and they're gone.
Is he though? Is it a cycle?
Oh God! If they'd have just hinted at that, I would have been fine with that ending, but they didn't. The other part that they're supposed to be protecting the South from the wildlings. Oh wait, those are all Jon's buddies, and they're all pretty much cool with them, and even the ones that aren't are going to be like, oh well, he's gave them land.
I agree, and that's why I'm a big fan of Rambo 3. You know, where we celebrate the brave fighters of the Taliban, allies holding off the Russian hordes. Like, what could possibly go wrong, Ed? I mean, that was what 30 years ago. So in Jon's lifetime, the Wild Wings could fucking Al Qaeda that shit.
That's true. That not disagreeing. But the third thing, of course, is there's supposed to be watchers on the wall. You know, that thing with a giant fucking hole in it that they can't fill because it was originally built with magic and giants, which they have access to neither of at this point. Yeah. So remind me again, what's the purpose of having anybody at Castle Black at all?
Really quick, I think that ended up being a metaphor, not a... It wasn't the punishment of going to the Night's Watch, because the Night's Watch will probably exist to some degree, but not to the degree that it did.
The Night's Watch is just Alcatraz now. Castle Black is just a prison.
Yeah, it's a prison. It's for the outcasts and those that people don't want.
And that's an unsatisfying ending to a character that you invested so much.
So you know that Jon is the king beyond the wall now, don't you?
Yeah, Jon.
Well, no, he's technically the 1000th commander of the Knights.
No, he's not.
With the Wild.
Jon left with the Wild Wings.
He walked out. They closed the door behind him, and he will never return. Jon turns around on his horse.
He's king beyond the wall.
But at least he was dressed in black.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, like, there is a huge part of me that after the fan outrage that came from the sending Ghost off with Tormund Giantsbane.
Just pet your fucking dog, Jon.
Out loud. I said it out loud. My son and I were watching. My wife's away in Texas, so she was watching it remotely. But as I'm watching it with my son, as they show the scene and he sees the dog, out loud, I say, "Pet that fucking dog," and he did. Thank God. But there's a part of me that's like, I wonder if they brought Kit Harington in for a quick reshoot just to get that out.
I was hoping that Ghost would like bite him.
Good.
Ghost should just go and bite him.
But at the end of the day, Jon actually isn't in. You know, the outcast Jon is the outcast from the kingdoms.
Yeah,
he's a wildling at heart. You know, Jon kind of.
What point does it? And I agree with all of that. What point is it making him a Targaryen then?
I think it's a quick plot point. Like Kris said, it's that singular plot point that makes Daenerys threatened, because there's nobody else in the realms that threatened Daenerys Targaryen. She had a dragon. She could wipe out an entire city with a dragon, an entire fleet with a dragon. When they put the novices at the ready for the
because she couldn't take out a fleet with two, but the same fleet she could take out with one.
Well, when you have the spaceball gunner shooting, it helps out greatly. But
obviously, plot points aside, like they have to get rid of one dragon so that there's only one left. It had to happen. Right. If you're gonna go that route.
I'm curious if they did that for like Walking Dead effect, like, oh well, we got to kill a main character, let's kill Carl off, because why not do that? And this is why you had made a statement, Kris, where you're like, well, you know, I don't know if I'm going to read the books now that I know the ending, or something along those lines. And I'm like, I know I'm going to read the books now because I know ending has to be better.
Than what it was. I'm 100, so I don't conflate the series to the books in the slightest now.
Yeah, agreed. That's what you have to do.
That's a better way to do it.
Well, I can't even think that there's huge divergent points.
There are several plot lines in the books that aren't even revealed. Like, and we can get into the Lady Stoneheart thing, the TV show, because the Dorne conspiracy never even got off its footing.
And that's what I was going to say to you when you were referencing, like, 10 is the general thing I see on the internet. It's like it should have been 10 seasons. Do you remember how slow and how bad the pacing was with the Sand Snakes? how drawn out those episodes were.
It was, but I don't feel like they got the whole reason why the Dorner even brought into the plotline, aside from the Red Viper, who was a fantastic character, was the Dorne conspiracy, was the fact that there was another quote unquote Targaryen who's probably not a real one if you read the books and kind of get the picking up what they're putting down in the books. But there was a whole conspiracy how the Prince from Dorne was trying to overthrow Cersei. Like they could have played that out. I just don't think they did a very good job of it.
Oh,
and then whenever they realized the fans didn't like it, they just said, all right, we're going to kill them all off and they're done. I mean, that may well happen in the books as well.
I think, though, too, you're looking at the creators are creating a story based on the books by George R. R. Martin. They're not creating the books by George R. R. Martin.
Yeah, we had a great conversation at work today, and one of my friends said, I would not be the least bit surprised. This is a unique position for an author. To have a TV series based off of your work that you haven't finished yet.
Mm-hmm.
And what if, and this is my tinfoil hat moment for the show, what if Martin said, this is the original ending that I wanted to have for the book. Let the show do it, and oh crap, everyone hated it. So now I'm going to write something different. So that the ending in the books is different than the one that was on the show, because he's going to give the ones that everyone wanted.
So that doesn't sound crazy either, because
it doesn't.
Because if I'm Martin and I'm a producer of a show about books that I haven't finished, I'm going to tell them my end result most likely. I'm going to say, well, this is where I think it should end, and then you have other creative entities making your work. So they put their, to me, this is in many ways, it's no different than Star Wars without Lucas. You can tell the difference between the storyline of Star Wars with 6 episodes with George Lucas, and then you go to 1 episode with J.J. Abrams, which felt like it was like a different universe of Star Wars. Like we had pin particles that took us down another path. And then you have another movie about Star Wars made, which is completely divergent, even remotely close to anything that Lucas put out. And you look at that storyline, it's because the creator's not creating the story anymore.
That's a good analogy, because I'm curious if when Martin gave them, here's what my thought processes was, this is where I think it's going to go on paper, if they J.J. Abrams did like they did with Lucas. Like Lucas gave them treatments for episodes 7, 8, and 9. Here's where I think the story should go. And J.J. Abrams went, that's cool, threw it out,
right,
and started his own. It makes me wonder if the ending that we got from the developers of the show, they did something similar. Like they looked at the ending and went, no, that's stupid.
I think
the show isn't a book.
That's right. And I need to make that divergence to be able to kind of swallow it down. Right. Overall, I'm still happy. I get the ending. Yeah, I think that's probably everyone's like, well, aren't you mad about the ending? I'm not. I'm genuinely not mad about the ending. I'm mad about some of the loose dangling threads, like the Valonqar. Like I thought Cersei was supposed to get killed by a brother. Like I honestly
she'd die at the hand of her little brother.
Right.
So there's multiple ways she was at his hand, at Jaime's hand. Jaime's the younger brother.
Or that Tyrion was on the other side of the battlefield.
No. Tyrion told Jaime to take them down to get to a boat. So if Tyrion hadn't said that,
absolutely take that route.
So that was an amazing scene, with the lighting shining down and him having the breakdown of having lost what little family he had left.
No, if nothing else, I will give Peter Dinklage full credit. Like he acted the hell out of this series and this season specifically. Like he was easily one of the shining beacons. He did such a good job on it.
Right. And going all the way through, I think it was an extremely strong series and a strong season, but it just doesn't do what you wanted it to. Right? Emotionally, it leaves you with different feelings. But so have you seen Arlington Road?
I have not.
Okay, so Sean, have you seen Arlington Road?
No.
Okay, so this is going to be giant spoilers. It's an amazing film. You will hate every second of the ending. So I'm going to spoil it for you. But
remind me. I may have seen this again. Remind me.
So
I thought it was
the guy moves into a house and makes friends with his neighbors, and his neighbors like an architect and stuff. And turns out his neighbor's a domestic terrorist. So he frames it. I can't remember exactly now, but basically, the bad guys win. He does loads of stuff, but loses his kids, and his wife leaves him, and he goes to jail. And like, the bad guys just drive off happily into a sunset.
I think I do remember that movie. Now
Yeah,
that you said that.
it's
I
an
do remember
amazing
that.
film, but it's amazing because it leaves you with these feelings that aren't normal, and that's what makes it different.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so what about Dark Knight?
Ooh.
Okay, do you feel
top
happy
five.
at the end
One of
of?
my top 5.
Yeah, but is that a good ending for
Yes.
Batman?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
is it a feel good ending for Batman?
Oh no! But
But
it was a
here's-
good ending.
But does that make it?
At the end of the day, though, movies don't have to end with everybody feeling happy and shiny. I mean,
Yeah,
that's my
I
whole
would have been.
premise. That's my whole, when I watch movies, I enjoy movies. You know, one of the most interesting endings to me, strangely enough, is Lord of the Rings. Okay, and it's not what happened there. It's with Frodo. Now, I never read the books or anything like that.
Yep.
So Frodo not staying with his friends was probably one of the coolest things that they did, because Frodo was a changed man. Frodo had the PTSD. He had the 1,000-mile stare. You know, he was a guy who saw it all. His friends went with him and saw it all too, but they didn't bear the burden Frodo did. So
Yeah.
Frodo,
And they didn't
writing,
turn like he did. Ultimately,
Right.
in the end, he turned.
right, which is
Have
exactly.
you seen the Matthew Colville D&D YouTube series? He does like tips on being a DM and stuff like that, and he has one really good episode. I'll have to link it in the show notes for this one. But it's the difference between a railroad campaign and an open world campaign. He talks about he running a game with his friends, and like one of them said, "I'm gonna be can I be an heir to a dwarven kingdom?" Like, not really. Oh yeah, why not? And then it's like, oh, we can all be dwarves as well. And then one of them turns up and he's a hobbit. Like, oh, I thought we were all going to be dwarves. Oh, it's we're the same, aren't they? It's fine. Oh, what are you? What are you, a halfling? I'm a halfling thief. Yeah, that sounds right. And they go off and they go to this lonely mountain and do all of this stuff. And it's they do what they want and tell their own story. And then he comes to like 20 years later. He decides to run another game with Bilbo's nephew. And it's like, oh, this isn't the game that you ran for the other ones. It's completely different.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Well, and that's why that's why I qualified my disappointment. Like I'm not disappointed on how it ended, and I understand the constraints and the actors and everything that was.
Whoa! Bran as king is bullshit, by the way.
I agree with that too. But
Okay, so we'll get into that. Again, it's the dangling threads I think that disappointed me more than anything else. Like the Valonqar prophecy, like why did Arya's character goes down, becomes a faceless man, learns how to use this ability of stealing faces, and then never uses it after she takes out Walder Frey. Why? Why didn't she use any of that at that point in time? So like there's just these weird little things that just kind of got dropped off that I'm like, I need resolution to those story arcs. The Bran being king thing, that whole scene. I had a friend of mine, we had talked right before that episode. He said he had a theory that they were going to go to some sort of democracy, that they were going to get all the lords and say, you know what, we don't need a king. All of us can rule justly. And when they had that circle of people built around Tyrion, I'm like, oh my God, he's right. That's where they're going to go.
Wasn't that spoiled though?
It very well may have been. I
thought that was spoiled.
I've avoided spoilers as well.
No, I'm just saying. No, because I heard that before also, that scene existed and everything else. So, not sure if that's an original thought, but
and he very well may have stolen it. I'm not saying that it's his idea. He very well may have stolen it. Well, even on the last In Focus that we did, I jokingly said, "Oh no, Bran's going to be king," but I said it as a joke, and then it happened, and I went, "That makes no sense." There's three things that happened simultaneously in that scene that all of them make no sense. One, they chose Bran as king. You know, the guy that's been creeping people out and isn't really all together there. He's everywhere all at the same time. What qualifies him to be the best ruler? Because he knows history? That doesn't make him a good ruler. The second thing that happens is, as they're doing that, Sansa Stark goes, "Oh yeah, but the North, we're an independent kingdom." And Bran's like, "Yep, I'm cool with that. And then the third thing that happens in that scene simultaneously, you have the Prince of Dorne that is sitting there. Now, if you're not a book reader, they never conveyed this on the show. But when Aegon came over and conquered the Seven Kingdoms, he only ever conquered 6. The one kingdom that he could not conquer was Dorne. Dorne ended up coming into the fold later for political and financial reasons. So there's the Prince of Dorne who knows that history, sits there and says, "Yep, the North can be free, but Dorne, we're gonna go into the fold." So like it really, I genuinely was expecting whenever she said that for everyone to stand up and say, "Well, then Dorne wants to do the same thing. We don't want to be a part of this whole thing. We're gonna do our own thing."
Well, then, did the reasons why Dorne opted into the Seven Kingdoms change?
No, probably not.
So,
But I mean, it was just a weird scene to me. Like, how did that? And everyone was cool with it. Everyone was like, "Yep, no, you're the Queen of the North. Cool."
See, that was fan service for me. That Sansa gets to be her own.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't. And again, that's one of the things that makes me fine, I suppose.
One of the other reasons why I think it's okay to have Bran as king is because there is no more Iron Throne.
Okay.
The symbol of the Seven Kingdoms is gone, and Bran now, who's Bran the Broken, and the way they set it up is a pseudo oligarchy, pseudo, it's
Bran's king because he's not going to do anything to get in the way of the people who actually need to run the kingdom.
Right. So in a way, they're democratically ruling themselves anyway.
Yeah, the small council will sort everything out, and Bran will just let them do the jobs. And
so if I can, I will pay service to a couple of things I think that they got right. 2 things: the scene where Daenerys comes in and Drogon's behind her, and you've got the wings spreading out. Easily one of my favorite scenes in any TV, movie, series, period. Super cool, very well shot, super impressive. I even thought at the moment it was like breathtaking how well they had done that. The second was that symbolism of Drogon melting the Iron Throne. Now there are some people like, well, why didn't the dragon cook Jon? What? How?
Because Jon's a Targaryen.
Is that the reason? Because they never.
No. It leaves you thinking. That's a plot point that leaves you thinking.
It does. So what it made me think was that Drogon knew that his mother was dead, knew that Daenerys was dead.
Yeah, because he
knew that Jon was the one. Yeah, knew that Jon was the one that killed him. Agreed with Jon, like, yeah, I'm kind of upset that you killed my mom, but she was kind of out of control. And that throne right there is the reason why she went out of control. I'm taking it out for good. And then I'm taking off and flying into the sunset. Yeah. I will give 100% credit. That was a cool way to end that. And if nothing else, if I can walk away from this series, that was probably the coolest way to end that, was to have that dragon melt that throne.
Do you not wish that it had happened maybe 30 minutes further into the episode?
30 minutes earlier?
Yeah. No, later in the episode, because
yeah, that was pretty early on.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, if
there's a lot of I would have rather it ended with Jon being thrown in jail and everything unanswered.
Yeah.
Because everything after that point just felt like fan service.
Yeah, it was Lord of the Rings ending. It was everybody was touched, everything was touched, and
then everyone goes back home.
Right.
Except for the one character that sails off into who knows what. Yeah, very Lord of the Rings ending.
Lots of people don't go home, but they start new stories. And it was good. It was well done. Bronn coming back made me laugh and was funny. And I love the character. The actor's really, really good.
He's fantastic. We need to rebuild the brothels. I'll pay for that.
Yeah.
Sam
kept cutting Sam off. Yeah.
Yeah. Sam being the maester was fine.
That did shoot one of my theories down, though. I wish they hadn't.
But he was the one who wrote the book.
Right. And when I was so set up. I was so set up, like, God damn it, I knew it. Where he lays down the book, it's titled A Song of Ice and Fire, and he opens his mouth. He's like, I've been writing a history of the Seven Kingdoms. I've called it A Song of Ice and Fire. Here it is. But instead they went with another author who had wrote it. And I'm like, okay, I can kind of go with it. But they had an opportunity. They really had an opportunity to play a hysterical joke that they didn't go with. When they were talking about Tyrion's role in the Song of Ice and Fire, they're all kind of looking around each other. They could have been like, well, the Maester wrote you to look very ugly in the book, and like you had your nose cut off at the Battle of Blackwater, because that's what happened to the character in the book, but didn't happen on the TV show. Like they could have just like tipped the hat, like yeah, it's a little different, and here's why, because another person wrote the book that wasn't interested in Tyrion being a good-looking character. I thought that would have been a hysterical way to end it.
Well,
Yeah.
there's loads of good for paying fan service, and I feel like the episode does wrap everything up neatly, despite you feeling like the things you're saying are loose threads aren't really important threads.
Right, and that's that's the disappointment.
They have been answered, just not to your satisfaction.
Yeah, that they genuinely weren't important towards the end of the story. And I think that's probably where my disappointment comes from, because you felt that all of those little pieces, that they were all woven into a thread of a gigantic, bigger story, and ultimately end those loose threads that I wish they'd have done better at, didn't mean anything. And I think that's the emotional investment of is the red herring that you're chasing. Who are Jon's parents? What's Arya going to do with the faceless men? What Bran? What's he doing? What was he doing the entire time at Winterfell? Like all of those threads just gone. And here's where the ending came from. And none of those were important. That's the disappointment that I'm talking about.
It's like the hint at the magic in the old crypts, which is obviously featured a lot more in the book, like the magic in the crypts at Winterfell. That doesn't do anything. Yeah, the Night King can still raise all these dead people. It's fine.
Yep.
There's loads of stuff that just gets swept past, and I think partly because they pay fan service for like the entire series to what people like from the books, because that's how you keep people happy.
Right.
But ultimately, the writers don't care about that.
Too.
Yeah, but the big question. I never read the books, so I'm not. I have zero. I have a connection. I'm not connected to the story the way a lot of people who read the books were in the beginning till the books ran out. I wasn't connected to the story. When I first started paying attention to this, it's still a very good fantasy series.
Yes.
And if you take away your loose ends that you're talking about, and you take away the story arcs that either were shortened or never existed, or you take away all of that, it is still a great fantasy series to watch. It's a great fantasy series to follow. And it's one of those things. If it wasn't it, number one, I wouldn't be on this episode, and number two, I wouldn't be planning on going back and actually watching the whole thing, because time is precious when it comes to daily activities and daily life. So they created something that hasn't been done on TV ever. They created what Conan the Barbarian did as far as for that hardcore fantasy, misogynistic fantasy that you had,
the non-Tolkien fantasy.
The non-Tolkien fantasy, correct.
Exactly.
You look at that and you say, this is done what that did back then. Yes. Is that this has opened a whole world. Now, I will almost put money on it. Not going to say it's going to happen, but just like Star Wars did in the 70s, you had a lot of spin-offs when it came to TV. You had Battlestar Galactica, which was TV's version of the space opera in Star Wars. You had Buck Rogers, which I know Buck Rogers existed, but it didn't exist in the way that it existed when it came out after Star Wars. You have all of these different things that spawned because of that. Now you can have all these other, I want more fantasy on TV. I want more epic stories told in a fantasy setting. You look at the fantasy movies and the fantasy settings since really Conan, and they've all kind of meta-need, but they're not that great. Willow, not a very great story overall. Lady Hawk, not a great. No, hear me out. I love the movie.
What are you doing?
No. I love the stories, but they're not going to carry the weight of something like that.
Warwick Davis and Val Kilmer. No. Are you kidding me? Willow's amazing.
Like I said, for a one-off.
I know where you're getting.
Yeah.
I'm just pulling your chain just a little.
Yeah, but it's that, the long-term fantasy. I'm hoping that this spawns more. Isn't there
So do
supposed
I.
to be a spin-off series off of this?
Okay, so there is. So they are already shooting the spin-off series, and it's supposed to be a prequel series, but they're doing the right thing. I know I've said this 1,000 times. If you do a prequel series, you can't do something that's so close because I already know how it ends. They're doing a prequel series that's like 1,000 years in the past. So we don't know the full stories of what's going on there. So it's going to be far more interesting to me.
So it's
But I
Knights
happen
of,
to be
Knights of the Old Republic.
I was
exactly.
really sad that they killed off the Hound because I'd seen a comic strip of Arya and the Hound as like a buddy show.
Oh my god! If he'd have
Yeah.
survived, I bet you he'd have gone with her.
Yeah.
That would have been cool.
I would have watched that series.
But I'm also interested in it opens the gates. I know it wasn't very well done, but did anyone ever see the Dragonlance movie, the animated
Yeah.
one, where Kiefer Sutherland did the voice for Raistlin?
Yeah.
I wanted that to catch on. I wanted that to catch on because I love the Dragonlance series. I grew up reading it. It would have been a fantastic series to have done, but it was before its time. It was before Game of Thrones. It didn't quite catch on, and the production value wasn't super great.
Well,
but
and
I could,
and it only hit a small niche of people, which was that nerd culture that existed back then.
right, exactly.
Remember, nerd culture up until the late 90s, 2000s, early 2000s, really
crediting
really,
Iron Man.
Yeah, it was really an underground thing. If you were at a game store playing D&D or playing in your basement, people made fun of you. You even talked about that at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Where nerd culture became cool as board games started to rise. You look at the rise of D&D again. You look at all of these things that have risen because nerd culture is now cool. So
and video games are cool, and
right.
comic books are cool, and fantasy stuff is cool. Yeah, no, I'm right on board with you.
So now you can do things like this. Back then, if now of course it wouldn't work today because nobody knows really the story of Raceland and all of that. You really.
But that's why I think it could be great. That's why I think because there is a whole swath of people that have never read the Dragonlance novels, have no idea what they're getting into.
I would rather see some Rift War stuff from Raymond Feast.
Yep, I was thinking
that's where I would go.
Wheel of Time, I could see. So I'm curious. So what normally happens is when you have successes like this, you have a whole bunch of other production companies to go and try to suck up all these properties and produce their own versions of X, Y, or Z.
It'll never meet the standard of Game of Thrones, but it'll still be something that you have out there like it.
Right, and I'm all on board. Anything as long as fucking sci-fi isn't doing it, unless Ronald D. Moore's producing it, as long as fucking sci-fi is not doing it. Anything that puts fantasy in the lexicon now post Game of Thrones, I think is good.
It's funny because I think Westworld is a future version of fantasy, of that fantasy genre.
It's just like Star Wars isn't really sci-fi.
No, it's not. It really and truthfully isn't. It's in a sci-fi style, but it's not science fiction.
Yeah, and Westworld definitely falls into that same category for me. I would agree with that.
Right. It's a Westworld to me is a fantasy. It's like a modern age fantasy world, And I'll tell you right now, I loved the trailer they had for season 3 of Westworld.
I've not seen that yet.
That was fucking cool.
Yeah, and after hearing our conversations, I am pausing my Sopranos run so I can pick up Westworld season 2 so I can catch up to you guys.
Oh my god, it's so good. That is such a good show. I'm watching season 1 again, and I'm catching the things that I missed the first time through.
I think I've watched season 1 of Westworld 3 times now.
Yeah,
I watched it once.
I
watched it once myself, live. Then I watched it on catch up again because I knew it was quite deep. And then once season 2 was coming out, I made Jill watch it as well, so we watched it together.
Yep.
But getting back to Game of Thrones, I think that this is going to be the new trend center. And then if the prequels are any, the prequel show that they're making is any good, it'll just add to it. That the hard part is going to be the expectations.
Yeah. Well, what I'm afraid of is that it gets Capricorn. Produced Battlestar Galactica, which if you've not seen that, it is 4 seasons of amazing. I wish that Sci-Fi had given them a 5th season to stretch the story out a little bit, but overall, Yep. Overall,
I'm
an
pretty sure.
amazing show.
I'm pretty sure Battlestar Galactica finishes once they reach New Earth or whatever it's called.
Right,
New
but so
New Caprica.
Battle.
Sorry.
Okay, so the story, of course, is that when Battlestar Galactica season 3 came up, the viewership was down. The viewership was down because they put it on at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. Interesting, that's where they put Game of Thrones at. But at the time, that's whenever DVRs were becoming a big thing. So people were recording it and not watching it. So it looked like their numbers were down, and the Maelstrom stuff didn't have the ability to catch all the stuff that was being recorded and watched later. So they told them the ratings were down, and they had to button up in a season. Ronald D. Moore wanted to do it over 5 seasons. His treatment for the entire thing was supposed to go over 5 seasons. He was forced to condense it into 4, which is why if you watch the 4th season of Battlestar Galactica, it feels a little bit rushed towards the end.
But then hold on. So,
go ahead.
So how many years later do we have a series that has an ending that seems rushed? It's the exact same thing, because...
So I would disagree that the ending to Game of Thrones for me is meh. The ending of Battlestar Galactica is just like, fuck off. Just fuck off. I will watch Battlestar Galactica and the standalone movies and everything. I'll watch them start to finish, but I promise you, it finishes when they land on New Caprica. That's the end of the show. It's awesome. Good ending. Well done, guys.
After that, just stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they could have. There was still interesting things. The things I loved about Battlestar.
The only thing I would miss out on is Fat Starbuck.
Yes. Fat Starbuck and the suicides and everybody offing themselves towards the end, which was awesome. That was a great, because you didn't expect it. And then of course,
Fat Starbuck or was it Fat Apollo you meant to say?
Oh, Fat Apollo, sorry, yeah.
I started going
Fat
back
Apollo,
through my history of
Fat Apollo is best Apollo. Was it the Axe body spray put out a new fragrance? Fat Apollo just smells like bacon.
But my point being, so after Battlestar Galactica wrapped up, they did a prequel series that predated before the Cylon War.
The Capricorn one?
Yeah, and it was crap. Nobody liked it. It didn't live up to the expectations that had been laid down by Battlestar Galactica. So that's what I'm afraid of is going to happen with the spin-off season with Game of Thrones. And then serious sci-fi hasn't been on TV much since. You could argue that Star Trek Discovery is serious, but that goes into a whole different world of, the J.J. Abrams universe versus classic Star Trek, and you have the same situation that you have with Star Wars nerds. You have Star Trek nerds that are like, this isn't my Star Trek. Like, I get that this is in the J.J. Abrams universe, but now you're fucking with canon storylines, and where the hell was this ship whenever Kirk was around? Like, you totally fuck up the whole story, and they're gonna potentially do the same thing with the Picard series, which I want to work so bad because I want to know what the hell happens after Nemesis. God damn it!
So I don't. There'll be people. So this goes back to you like Next Generation. I like Deep Space Nine. Okay.
Yeah, and that when I was
the expectation
came out. That's my Star Trek.
Yeah, the expectation of watching a Star Trek program when they bring out a new one. If you've watched all of DS9, all of Next Generation, you can't. DS9 doesn't compute in that. It is not the same thing. It's not the same show.
It was better.
DS9 is better. You are right. I agree. Because original series to Next Generation is the same show.
It's they're close, but they're not the same.
Obviously, the execution is different. But if they made Next Generation in the 70s, it would have. That's what it would.
Because it had the same formula.
Yeah.
Here's the whole cast.
I actually
here's a
think
problem. Here's resolution. Everyone goes back to reset at the end.
Yeah.
Except for it was more benign, I think, than started the original series. I think that because of the whole play on the first contact rule or the prime directive and all of that, being the absolute forefront of that show, kind of took it out. And you didn't have characters like Kirk, like Scott or not Scotty, Spock, McCoy. You didn't have that core group like you did. Riker was not a Kirk at all. Picard
No,
was
but
nowhere near Kirk.
obviously,
You know,
I'm not saying it is of the same show. This is like saying,
They're
episode 7.
formulaic.
Yeah, episode 7 is not the same as an episode 4. They're not the same film. You can compare them very closely and understand why people would say that they were the same, but they are factually they're not. And that's what I'm saying about, yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually
I
a
get
really
where
good
you're
analogy.
coming. I get where you're coming from on that. It's just
Well, I would say watching
Deep Space Nine to me was the worst Star Trek, and it's not. I'm not trying to be. Hold on, I'm not trying to be contrarian here either. I didn't like it because it was to me very limiting. You know, it limited Star Trek where. And it's just me. It's just my perception.
And that's fine. But that's the thing, though. Like you would do a better job of comparing DS9 to like watching Seinfeld or it's a situation. Obviously not the comedy aspect, but it's a sitcom.
Yeah, no, I understand.
It's about the people.
It's an episodic serial show. Yeah, no, I get that.
And that's why I think DS9 got better, was because their first season was not like that. That laid down the groundwork for it.
Yeah.
But over the course of seasons, the whole story unfolded, and but it was still Star Trek. It was still in the Star Trek universe. It still had that Star Trek look and feel. But if you missed 2 episodes, you missed out. You got to go back and watch those 2 because you have no idea what happened before. If you missed 2 episodes of Next Generation, meh.
Yeah,
yeah, because it wasn't truly linear.
Unless you got the bookend where it was one, season ending and where they did the crossovers.
Right.
You're fine. You didn't miss anything.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, if they do more Game of Thrones stuff, if you go in the expectation of this is what Game of Thrones was, so this is what the prequels will be, I feel like you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Because if you go into watching DS9 expecting it to be Next Generation, you will not like it.
Well, one of the things they can do with it, which George Lucas didn't do with his prequels, is he can, with the prequels to Game of Thrones, you can have the giants. Magic could be a prevalent thing, or a day-to-day thing, where you can follow those paths rather than, whenever we watch fantasy, when you look at Lord of the Rings, it's always the tail end of the great era of magic. Always.
Yes.
Because they don't really know how to deal with magic, We can't. Did you ever read the Piers Anthony series, Incarnations of Immortality?
I did not.
So great book series to read. It's because they're all intertwined. There are 7 separate books that all intertwine into one story that tells one story. And it's really the story of Satan, but it's the story of Satan kind of told through these different angles. And the first book is called On a Pale Horse, and it's the story of death. It's about the incarnations, which is death, fate, Mars, or the god of war, Lachesis' fate, Mother Earth, and so on, in time. The interesting thing about the first book is it sets up the entire story. The entire story is it's a future world, it's Earth in the future, and magic is being rediscovered by science. So science refound the alchemy of magic, and it's in the world that's around. Now, the whole story isn't about the magic, but the magic definitely exists. And you see it in the story and how the story is conveyed. It's very cool because of that, but that's not what the story is about. But the magic is strong and it exists and it's everywhere, where with these stories, that's the thing I didn't like about Game of Thrones through the whole thing of me watching it the way that I did, is that I want a series where magic matters, where magic is a story in its own self, because we've never had that. Lord of the Rings, you tailed off. You had the wizards. The wizards were at the end of their time, still trying to hold on to the magical realm and still trying to hold Middle Earth together.
Could interject for a second? And I'm pretty sure you were saying that you don't like the Skywalkers and aren't interested in Star Wars stories with Jedis in them.
Right.
So is that not the same thing.
Not to me. That's
The like, space wizards and magic is just using the
I
force.
equate them more like monks or wizards. I don't, or not wizards. It's religion to me. It's that's the way that I view it. Is it's more like
I think I'm going to end up taking two stances on this because I can agree with both of your points. I think to Sean's point, he doesn't want to see Star Wars stories with Jedi and lightsabers and all that because he's already seen it. They've already done it. He wants to see the part that doesn't involve it.
Yeah, we saw it in episode 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3, absolutely. And that was one of the things. I mean, I know everyone makes fun of the prequels. I happen to be the ones that they've grown on me over the decades. That was one of the coolest parts about the prequels was you got to see open Jedi, open combat. Like they weren't this secret people hiding out that were trying to overthrow an empire in secret. They were out in the open. People knew who they were. You saw a whole bunch of them in a pit fighting. You got to see that. But to Chris's point, I think if Game of Thrones had gone down the route of having open magic, I don't know that it would nearly have been as successful. I think half the reason why Game of Thrones was as successful as it was because it was fantasy, but the magic was toned down to only one on the volume knob. Like it was there, you had hints of it, and there were dragons. But everything else,
remember, Game of Thrones was not a fantasy series when it started. If you didn't know anything from the book, you would think you were watching The War of the Roses with tits and ass.
Right.
Yep.
That's why Game of Thrones took off and was popular.
Yep.
Because
and I agree with that.
It was a story about characters that didn't hold back. It had interesting subplots and character development and wasn't scared of, gratuitous tits and ass.
Right.
And penises.
And every time they've been mentioned magic, it was something, it's gone from the world. You never.
Right. And that's what you always find, That's what made Highlander so cool, is because it brought this, the original Highlander brought this almost magical realm back into existence in our time. That was really cool. The thing is I want to see a series. Conan had very little magic. It had some, but it was very little.
The setting of Conan is very non-magic.
I realize that. Yeah, but there is.
It's not swords and sorcery fantasy type stuff.
Right.
And I'm still.
It's tits and ass in combat. That's what that is. That's what's so
good. I see a true series of D&D where, that fireball spell exists. Where that lightning bolt spell. That's what I love. That's what I want to see. They've tried it. I know.
That's what I had such high hopes for that damn movie.
Yeah. Well, they've tried it a couple times,
and they even had Jeremy Irons in it too. Like, I mean, it had potential, but I don't know who the fuck wrote it, but it was so bad.
And
they did 3 of them.
And parcel of trying to do something like that is, again, you end up doing stuff because you need to have a fireball, you need to have a dragon. Oh, look, we probably need a dungeon somewhere because it's Dungeons and Dragons. We've got to have both. We can't have one. And it's like, no, just tell a story.
Right.
That's what Game of Thrones does. That's why.
That's what your at the table campaign is. It's a story that's being told about characters.
You have
characters are just living that story.
You have the same. So Ed will probably maybe appreciate this more than you, Sean. I can't quite remember how deep you stand on this, but the idea that when people want Games Workshop to use their IP for movies and series and stuff like that, Adeptus Astartes and Space Marines just don't work because they are not interesting characters.
No, I get that. I understand.
Although I do wish that damn Ultramarines movie was less walking and more badassery.
So I've got
Don't get me wrong, I like it.
I enjoyed it.
It was a good movie. I watch it every once in a while, but man, do I wish it had been more badassery.
But people want the intro trailer to Dawn of War. They don't actually want the story, because if you tell a story about a Space Marine, they're pretty dull.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, no, I understand that completely, and I fully get where you're coming from.
Well, like
my
big
thing,
Sean.
Well, my big thing is that when I play D&D, ours was an epic campaign. It was played over almost 20 years with the same characters.
Oh God, I'm so jealous. I wish I could have done that.
The characters, at the end of the day, the characters weren't level 30. I think the highest level was a 19th level rogue, halfling rogue. And that's because rogues level faster. You know, my wizard was level 16. I think when I, you know, 16 to 18 in the last, and we had, you know, 3 grand adventures. Our DM was incredible, but we had 3 grand adventures that lasted about 100 hours each, and then a finale. Then, you know, that grand finale that in the end got rushed like Game of Thrones due to my ex-wife. But it's it's one of those things where just that feeling, that excitement, that rush that you got at the table playing those characters. I would love to see a movie where, number one, you would have to set it up where the characters become beloved characters, where people want to see the characters. That's what Game of Thrones did. They created, you know, character. They put characters into play that people became, you know, enamored with. You know, you look at how many people are pissed off because Dany didn't get the throne. You know,
She
you
got
look
to
at how
touch it at least.
right. Yeah, she did. You know, but she never really sat in it. You know,
That's probably, if I want a disappointment, why couldn't she have just turned around and sat down just for a second? Just for a second? No?
you know,
Okay.
you know. Then you had Jon Snow, which you had people behind Jon. You had Tyrion. You had these great characters. You know, and that's what I'm hoping at some point you can get a fantasy movie that has all my D&D things that I want to see. I don't care if you're in a dungeon. I don't care if you're in, you know, an overland adventures. It's just that
Yeah,
D&D story would be epic. If
it
you
would
did
need
it,
to be
if you
Game
did
of
it right.
Thrones character building, and the
Right.
magic would need to be there. But it's, I've often heard the way that Walking Dead is explained is that it's not a zombie show.
Right.
It's a character show, and the
Right.
zombies are kind of in the background, and they're like weather. Like they're there, and sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's good, but it's not driving the story. And
Right.
that's how it would have to be. You'd have to have good character development in a fantasy setting where magic just happens to be there, and it's
Right.
not the driving force.
Right.
And that's why shows tend to lend themselves to having the light magic settings, the fancy light, or the very like priestly magic generally, or
Right.
so the Westeros setting is very magic light, like Lord of the Rings is extremely light on fantasy and magic. If you
Right.
like the Shards of Narsil, Narsil isn't a magic sword. It's just a sword that he cut Sauron's finger off with. It's not magic. It's just pretty good.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, it was the sword of the lucky swing.
Yeah.
So like you had the ring, you had a couple of wizards and a dark lord, and beyond that, how much magic did you really see? Maybe the elven magic, but again, that was kind of like on the light side.
Plantia, you know, the crystal ball, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and Sauron, the Eye of Sauron, you know, which whether you're a book guy or not, I don't really care, but you know, the Eye of Sauron is a magical piece too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like for Game of Thrones, we get some magic. We get to see the three-eyed raven. It's actually like the show is actually a lot less magic than the books because it doesn't really talk too much about the magic in Winterfell. The blessings of the old gods. We don't see all of the Stark children are actually wargs and can like change into the possess the dire wolves. We get the Red Lady, but that's really it. Obviously the Night King and all of that we've still not really seen in the books yet. So
and you get Dany walking onto a pyre and surviving not once but twice and dragging. But again, like you said, it's very, very light.
Yeah,
That's why I was
Lord of the
really
Rings.
surprised that they went with the way they did with the Red Woman going through and lighting up all the swords. I'm like, this is the first time we've ever seen like open use of magic on the show.
So that was another could just get fucked. How many Dothraki did she have left?
Oh my god, yeah. Oh my god, yeah. Where did those guys come from? I was they were in the Vanguard and they were dead.
They were the ones left in reserve, you know. I don't know. You know, that's just me being facetious here. I don't know, you know.
My son asked me the same question. So whenever she's standing at the top of the stairs and you see all the legions of the Unsullied and you see did
she just not take them to Winterfell so she could really like fuck up Cersei later?
How many fucking Unsullied survived?
They were behind the planet at Endor. Come on.
They were behind plot armor is where they were. Like, because I don't know how. So if all those Unsullied survived and all those Dothraki survived, who the hell died at Winterfell? Obviously, none of the characters died.
Just the Night King, apparently.
Just the Night King and a whole bunch of a sea of zombies. That's it.
Yeah, you're right. That's definitely a big plot hole that they have. Going back to Lord of
formations of Unsullied. Where the hell did those guys come from?
I don't know.
I would say, like, taking it back into like Game of Thrones and then the books and stuff, I feel like they reversed it in the series. I think the books will culminate in the actual battle between living and the dead. Will be how the books finish, and the Iron Throne will have been resolved, because you have the underlying current that the story isn't about this overarching battle between good and evil. It's actually about who sits on the Iron Throne. But I feel like you'll get a much better payoff if you resolve that, and then it turns out that all of that was for naught, because you actually have this army of the dead. And I could honestly see like Westeros being scourged at the end of the books and no one living.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that will happen. I don't think Martin will go that route.
I honestly thought that the battle for, like, I thought they were, and I think we talked about this before. I don't know if we talked about it on recording or not, but I honestly thought that they were going to lose the Battle of Winterfell. A lot of the minor characters were all going to get wiped out, and they were going to have to flee south, and they were going to have to beg Cersei to get in the city because the army of the dead was coming. And like, you can let us die if you want, but these guys are coming and we can help you. Like, that's where I thought the story was going, and the battle was going to be in the south.
I think it had to be resolved at Winterfell. I honestly thought it would take longer than it did, but
well, strategically, it makes no sense. Like,
if you only had an hour and a half to resolve that.
But that was by choice. They could have given it 2 episodes. But that's where my.
Then you only have 1 episode to resolve the end.
By choice.
Yeah.
They could have. Yeah.
But you don't. You have to take it within the constraints that they set upon themselves.
I don't.
When you're looking at, I know.
Like,
when you're looking at story and you're looking at, they decided on 6 episodes. Where they would have been smarter to put that battle was episodes 1 and 2.
Because they built up so much on that first episode. It was like, hey, we're waiting for battle. That was the whole first episode. Strategically, the main problem that I have with it is I don't understand the Night King strategy in any way, shape, or form. Why did he blasted through the wall, took this huge, massive army, and attacked the only fortified position in his way between there and the south? Why not just walk past it?
Because he wanted Bran. It wasn't about anything else.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And why did he want Bran?
Well, I don't know.
Because Bran knew his story.
Ask him.
Right.
Because I think you can say that Bran knew his story. Bran was the greatest threat to everybody in the kingdom.
And now he's in charge.
Yeah.
So there's one of the other cool fan theories that I heard was that Bran's actually the bad guy of the whole series, and then he knew exactly how everything was going to turn out because he wanted to be in charge. And the reasoning for that, the reasoning for that, as being the three-eyed raven, he's no longer Brandon Stark. He is all of the other three-eyed ravens that came before him for years and years and years, for thousands of years. So it's not just him. It goes all the way back to the Children of the Forest. So who's to say that Brandon is going to do the right thing for the kingdom and not the right thing for the Children of the Forest? Well, that ultimately, he's really the big bad guy.
Ultimately, Bran actually admitted that. Because if you hear what he says when Tyrion...
Why else did I come down here?
Right. Why else am I here? To be king. Even though he doesn't want it, has never said he wanted it, why else would he come but to be king?
And that's why I'm kind of okay with that part of the ending. I still think it's weird. I think it was stupid the way that they presented it and how they... I also thought it was
interesting. For me, the diplomatic side of it, why Bran gets picked, is because it's just a little crippled boy, and who's going to say no?
Yeah, he's the least threatening.
Yeah, everyone will get behind him, and then the only one who doesn't is his sister, because she knows he's actually a freak.
Mm-hmm. And that's why she separated out.
And because she wanted to be queen. She wanted to be queen from the first episode. When she met Joffrey, she wanted to be queen. That's her whole story arc, was this development from this naive child who wanted to marry Joffrey. She loved Joffrey, if you'll recall, and wanted to be queen. And at the end of the day, and you saw her look when it came to be that they or that Tyrion suggested Bran. If you watched her face, it was like shock that she wasn't the one who was going to sit on that Iron Throne or whatever. It was shock that she wasn't going to be the one chosen. And that's why ultimately I think she chose for the not bending the knee to Bran. She chose to be an independent state so she could be the Queen of the North.
Yep. No,
And she is the one who suggested, she's the one who suggested that Jon rejoin the Night Watch, because Jon at the time was still King of the North, and the only way she could be queen, the only way she could be queen, there's two ways: Jon marries her, which wasn't going to happen, or she
not brother and sister.
Jon. No, I get that, but
yeah, but they were raised that way, and Jon already got icky feelings about maybe potentially touching his aunt the wrong way. So
yeah, but that's the whole show's, half the show's about incest. It's but she got what she wanted. She ousted Jon as King of the North and became Queen of the North.
So I think it's interesting how the story ends up. Is that of course you have a Stark on the throne, you have a Stark on the throne in the North, and you have Jon, who's like all the Starks win in the end. It's just not the way you wanted it to end.
But I thought, from the beginning, when you look at it, if you look at story arc, the Starks were the ones who suffered the most in the beginning. You have the Red Wedding, which the Starks suffer again. And then you notice as time went on, the Starks started to get stronger. Arya became who she was. Sansa became a pretty conniving bitch, when you really get down to it. You look at what she did
towards the end there, yeah.
You look at what she did to Baelish and what she did to what's his name when the Bolton, when she had his dogs eat him, and she watched it happen, And then you look at Jon Snow, who was never a Stark but was raised as a Stark and who was always torn. And you have, and I forget his name, Alfie Allen's character. I forget.
Theon Greyjoy.
Yeah, Theon, who is, he's a token that was given to the Starks for peace, and he's raised as a Stark, and he acts very similar to Jon Snow for most of the show. And then at the end, he becomes this hero, just like all the Starks became. He was a Stark at the end, and that's, kind of what was given to him at the end of that, that he was really a Stark, not a Greyjoy. And all the Starks made out in the end because at the beginning, they were the ones who were oppressed the most. That's the way that I look at it. It was always the story of Ned Stark. To me, that's the way it always played out. Ned Stark was the key figure at the beginning, and at the end, through his progeny, he's the key figure at the end. Because Ned Stark's beliefs, remember, Ned Stark had this really different belief system than everybody else in that country, where he believed that, his way was the right way. And at the end of the day, two of his children are king and queen. His bastard son, pseudo son, is,
really his nephew, but yes.
Yeah.
Raised as a son.
Yes.
I was really expecting Howland Reed, because the old guy at the thing was Howland Reed.
You want to talk about drop storylines?
Yeah,
there we go.
It was like Howland knows that Jon's a Targaryen. So, come on, just drop it. Just drop that bombshell, walk away.
I bet you it happens in the books too.
Oh, I think.
In a book, you can write more story than you can in a movie.
You can, and like I said, ultimately, in the end, like I said, that's why I said my disappointments are not with the ending. It's how quickly we got there and how many of the story arcs that got dropped to get us there in the time frame that we did. Yeah. I think if this would have been 2 more seasons long and we still got to the same point. I mean, we've talked about all these points, and you're right. As we've discussed this out loud, you're right. All of it does ultimately, in the end, make sense. John's a tragic character who is never going to get to the throne because
Right.
of his honor bound the way that Ned Stark was. Just like Ned
Right.
Stark was never going to make it out of King's Landing alive.
Right.
Sansa wanted to
Oh,
be queen the whole time.
Jamie says to him when Jamie would have given up the throne for Ned to sit on. Ned was there before Robert. Ned could have been king.
Right. But
And
he
it's
chose
all
not.
and it's all that thing of like, had Ned been king, none of this would have happened.
Right.
Yes.
But Ned was, and it's a fallacy of being a good, honorable person is the right thing to do. When that's what season one, like the Game of Thrones, is all about.
Yep.
And that's
Being
what
a
the
good,
last
honorable person is not.
season one is all about that. The last episode is all about that.
And it goes full circle at the, how does John save the people of the world?
He sacrifices everything.
He sacrifices his honor.
Mhm.
Yes.
He stabs
Yeah.
the love of his life after Ygritte in the heart during
Right.
an embrace in a really callous, dark, not in character way. He quite literally betrays her and murders her while they're embracing.
And he
Yes.
betrays himself at the exact same time.
And that's a dichotomy of, he is Ned Stark's son, and in every
Right.
regard that he believes that honor and the noble choice is the correct way, and if everyone did that, the world would be the perfect place to live.
Right.
But through all of it, the growth of the character is that he accepts that he has to sacrifice that part of himself
I don't know.
to save the greater.
I don't know if he didn't, whether that was the story arc throughout. I don't know if I agree with that 100%. But it's when Tyrion is lecturing him about the end, what he has to do. Tyrion tells him there is only one way, because Tyrion knows he is the only one out of all of these people that will get close enough to kill her. And Tyrion convinces him to throw away that honor. Tyrion makes that statement. It's that what is it? From the Kingdom of Heaven. It's a line in Kingdom of Heaven. It's sometimes you have to do a little bad, to do a lot of good. And that's exactly what Jon Snow did. He did that bad to save everything else.
But and how many times is that choice put before Ned, though?
A lot.
A lot. And he could have
And
stopped the whole thing.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying about.
No, I agree with you on that.
And it goes contrary to, like, it shows. Let's see, Rob chooses to put selfish motivations
Right.
ahead of honor when he reneges on his vows to the phrase, which
Right.
leads to a red wedding. And that shows that, this is what happens when you sacrifice your honor, that bad things happen. And it's built up throughout the show and throughout the series.
Right.
And then it accumulates with, well, actually, this is how the world works. This is what you need, if you cling to your honor, all of these people will die.
Yes.
Right. No, that's a great way to put it too. That is actually a very, very well put way. The story arc. What's interesting to me is that it's Jon Snow who took Ned Stark's teachings to heart.
Yeah,
it wasn't his own
closest.
kids. It wasn't his own kids. It was the bastard son of Ned Stark who took, and even Theon, the outsiders of that family are the ones who took Ned Stark to heart.
Yeah. And you've got to remember that like, John's tempted throughout the series and has all of these choices. John sacrifices. He goes to join the Night's Watch. I don't think he joins the Night's Watch because he wants to be in the Night's Watch. I think he goes because he doesn't want Caitlyn to be put out by having to raise him anymore.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
agree.
I agree with
So
that. Yeah.
he has the opportunity to be with Ygritte and chooses to kill her.
Yes.
He
Yeah, the only time that his honor even come close to coming in question was whenever they beheaded Ned Stark. And when his father was killed, he left the Night's Watch. Now, Sam and his friends pull him back, but that's the only other time that his
Yeah.
honor was. And then after that, it's hardcore honor the whole way through. Like, even when he's with the wildlings, he's still a Night's Watch. He knows what he's there for.
yeah
Right. And even when he was, killed the people that betrayed him, he knew he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to kill a boy and the two people that betrayed him, but he did it because that was the right thing. That was the thing to do for for that honorable thing, because those people betrayed him, just like Ned Stark did when he beheaded the Night's Watchman, after the initial meeting of the White Walker.
yeah he passes the sentence, swings the sword.
Right. And that's exactly what Jon Snow did the whole time.
Yeah.
Or at least most of the time. I like to say
At least
whole
most of
time.
the time.
Yeah, at least most of the time.
Okay, so we're coming up on an hour and 25 minutes. So
I
yeah,
think we've had a good talk.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
This is
I'm gonna
therapeutic.
I'm gonna do a quick sum up of what I think. I think it was good. Um, I can agree with you, Ed. There's a lot of things. If you're a book, if you're a book person,
You wanted to say
unfortunately,
book nerd, get it out.
actually, I wanted to say, book wanker, like Ozzy Man says it. If you're a book wanker, but the big thing is that if you're the book nerd, you're probably not going to be as satisfied as someone like me who didn't read the books and who just enjoyed it for a series, which I'll enjoy it. I'll watch it in whole and I'll enjoy it. I enjoyed everything I've seen. Seeing it through the eyes of someone else and the explanations of someone else is actually a very cool way of watching that whole series, because you get the summation of the whole thing without having to sit there and go through every single, every hour of every episode. I can do that. And one thing about me, people, is I actually read the last chapter of every book before I read it.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that.
yes, I am actually a person. I am an unemotional person when it comes to storyline. You cannot spoil anything for it. If you told me exactly what happened in Endgame, wouldn't care. I haven't seen it. I'm gonna watch it when it comes out on Disney Plus. That's when I'll watch it for the first time. I actually already know most of what happened because I watch all this stuff.
Yep.
I'm not that interested. Overall, I'm not that dedicated to things. That's why I'm okay with the way, Last Jedi was, because I'm not emotionally entangled into all of that. What I like is a good story. I like a good I like good sword fights. I like, that type of stuff. I do like the storylines that come up. I really loved Arya's character. When you look at her
I
arc
want to
from
know more
being,
about what happens to her.
yeah, I would actually love to see a spin-off of her. She's an intriguing character, going to the unknown lands, that would be a great novel to read.
Kris, your final sum ups?
just wanted to point out how cool Jamie Lannister is. No, he's that much of a Kingslayer. He tried to do it 8 seasons ago.
Yeah.
What a guy! No,
The
so
guy.
my
He did.
my disappointments from the series aren't really in how it wrapped up. It's more in the expectations that I placed upon them, and like some of the story arcs, I think they did really well with. Other ones, I think they copped out on. Like Jamie's a perfect example.
Yeah.
That he developed his character, and they worked really hard on making you want to like him, and
The
then
whole
just
redemption story. Absolutely.
it's just pointless. Like there was no reason, but that builds up into the scene you get with Tyrion. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
uh,
That's the Tyrion. Yeah, I love that. That's a great way to put it.
and I you don't know. It, I would like to think that Jamie would have gone to save Cersei and then left her again once he knew she was safe, but that's me putting what I want on the character. And like I said, it's a part of the problem with modern internet culture is like the entitlement of it all. And I'm allowed to be disappointed that Jamie didn't turn out how I wanted him to.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't really affect the overall enjoyment of the show. And that's why there's things I would have done differently were I writing it, but were I writing it, we probably wouldn't have got through season 1. So there we go.
Yeah, Jamie's a good one to point out too, because like I genuinely thought that he was breaking behind the lines to kill her, to hopefully end the slaughter before it happened. That's what I honestly thought was going to happen, and it would have fulfilled the Valonqar prophecy. He would have killed her. The city wouldn't have been barbecued. Yeah. So again, that's one of those story arcs. Like his entire character arc development just kind of get dropped off for that scene, which I still don't understand. For me, my final sum ups, I'm going to chalk this up into Star Wars, as I hate to do it. I love the series. I love the universe that was built. I love the history that's behind it. I'm still going to buy the books. I'm currently reading the history of the Song of Ice and Fire right now, and I'm loving it. I love everything about it. Am I disappointed the way that they got to the end? Sure. Just like I'm probably going to be disappointed in some small fashion of how they get to the end of episode 9 later in the year. Am I going to be probably disappointed by that one? Sure. Does that retract from the years of enjoyment and my emotional involvement in that universe as I have with Game of Thrones? No. It's been a personal journey to go ahead and read those books, to be immersed in that world, and I love every bit of it. Even though it didn't end the way that I thought it was going to, that doesn't take away my enjoyment of it. So I'm just going to read the books. I mean, ultimately, man, I still think that Martin's trolling him, and like it's going to end completely different. I'm going to die on that hill until otherwise I've read it.
I don't think it can't end the same because the characters are all on different journeys.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So, all right, I think that's a good place to leave it. I hope you enjoyed us ranting about Game of Thrones for an hour and a half. It's therapeutic for us. Hopefully, it's been therapeutic for you as well. We appreciate you guys tuning in for it. So, thank you so much, and we'll see you on our regular show. Thank you once again for joining the Lack of Focus X-Wing podcast. Check out Dice Hate Productions for all the latest episodes, and we'll be looking forward to seeing you again next episode.